In the brutal landscape of World War II, few things symbolized Germany's military machine like its vehicles. From sleek tanks that struck terror into Allied armor to experimental oddities that broke more often than they worked, Nazi Germany fielded an astonishing variety of machines. Some were legends, others were disasters. But every single one tells a story of ambition, desperation, engineering genius, or blind overconfidence. This is the complete breakdown of every German vehicle used in WWII, the good, the bad, and the completely insane. We begin with the Panzers, the core of Germany's armoured strength. The Panzer I wasn't supposed to see combat. Designed in the early 1930s as a training tank, it was small, lightly armoured, and carried only 2 machine guns. But when the war began, Germany needed everything it had, and the Panzer I rolled into Poland and France. It couldn't stop a real tank, and it couldn't take a hit, but in numbers, it overwhelmed defences. This was Germany's first taste of mobile warfare, blitzkrieg, and the Panzer I was, ironically, the tiny spearhead. Then came the Panzer II, also a stopgap. It carried a 20mm autocannon, enough to shred infantry and light vehicles. It wasn't much against heavier armour, but the Panzer II helped define fast, armoured assaults in the early years. More importantly, its chassis proved incredibly versatile, forming the foundation for several self-propelled guns later in the war. This was a vehicle that overstayed its welcome because Germany simply had no choice. Next, the Panzer 35T and Panzer 38T captured Czech designs. When Germany annexed Czechoslovakia, they inherited tanks that were, in some ways, better than their own. The 38T especially earned respect for its reliability and firepower. These tanks didn't just fill gaps, they performed, particularly in the invasion of France. The 38T's chassis would also be used to build one of Germany's most effective tank destroyers, the Hetzer, a foreign design repurposed into German doctrine. But then came a leap, the Panzer III. This was meant to be Germany's main battle tank. With a 3-man turret, the Panzer III emphasized tactical efficiency, better crew communication, and a decent main gun. Early models were effective, but as the war dragged on, its armor and firepower were quickly outclassed, especially on the Eastern Front. Still, it served as a technical blueprint, teaching German engineers what worked and what didn't. Which brings us to the real workhorse, the Panzer IV. Unlike its predecessors, the Panzer IV wasn't just a stepping stone, it was the backbone of Germany's armoured divisions. It was produced from the beginning to the very end of the war, undergoing dozens of upgrades in armour, weapons, and design. This was the only German tank to serve on every front, from the frozen hell of Stalingrad to the burning sands of North Africa. It wasn't flashy, but it got the job done. But as German forces encountered the Soviet T-34, everything changed. The T-34 was fast, well-armoured, and sloped, and Germany didn't have a direct counter. Enter the Panther. Designed to take on the T-34, it had sloped armour, wide tracks, and a high-velocity 75mm gun that could kill from a distance. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was plagued with mechanical failures early on, but once the bugs were worked out, the Panther became one of the best medium tanks of the war, combining firepower, speed, and protection in a deadly package. Then came the icon, the WWII. With 100mm of armor and the legendary 88mm gun, the Tiger I terrified Allied tank crews. Its flat armor and enormous weight made it vulnerable to mobility issues and mechanical failures, but in combat, it dominated. A single Tiger could take out a column of Shermans if it didn't break down on the way. Pushing the extremes even further, the Tiger II, or King Tiger, was introduced. A 70-ton beast with sloped armor and an even more powerful gun, it was nearly invulnerable from the front. But it was also too heavy. It destroyed roads, sank in mud, and couldn't cross most bridges. Often, they never even made it to battle, breaking down or running out of fuel. The King Tiger was the definition of over-engineering. Terrifying, but impractical. But tanks weren't enough. Germany also developed a series of tank destroyers and assault guns, cheaper, simpler alternatives that could be mass-produced. The most famous was the Stu-G-3. Built on the Panzer III chassis, it ditched the turret for a fixed gun. creating a low-profile vehicle perfect for ambushes. It became the most produced German armoured vehicle of the war, not because it was glamorous, but because it worked. Then came the Hetzer, based on the Czech 38T. Small, hard to spot, and well-armed for its size, the Hetzer was a cost-effective killer. It didn't need to overpower, just outsmart. Other destroyers followed, the Jagdpanzer IV, nicknamed Guderian's Duck for its awkward nose-heavy wobble, the Marder II and the III, both desperate attempts to mount heavy guns on outdated tank chassis, and the Nashorn, essentially an 88mm gun mounted on a tin can. It was accurate and deadly at long range, but a death trap up close. But the crown jewel of German tank destroyers was the Jagdpanther. Built on the Panther chassis, with the same 88mm gun as the Tiger, it was fast, armoured and lethal. This was Germany getting everything right, but too late, and in too few numbers. Then came the Elephant, or Ferdinand. Built on Porsche's failed Tiger design, this tank destroyer was ridiculously armoured and heavily armed, but lacked a machine gun. That made it vulnerable to infantry with nothing but grenades. Later versions added one, but the damage was done. The Elephant was powerful but blind. Finally, the Jagdtiger, the heaviest armoured vehicle to see combat. It carried a 128mm gun capable of blowing through any Allied tank at incredible range. But it was slow, always broke down, and was too heavy for most terrain. More died to mechanical failure than enemy fire. Still, not all German vehicles were about direct combat. They also needed self-propelled artillery and anti-aircraft platforms. Early examples like the Sturmpanzer Bison, a 15cm gun mounted on a Panzer I, were top-heavy and comically unstable. But Germany kept trying. The Vesper, based on the Panzer II, offered mobility with indirect firepower. The Hummel, using a hybrid chassis, packed a 15cm howitzer with better armour and range. Both were designed to follow tanks and support them with artillery strikes. The Grill, mounting a heavy infantry gun on a Czech chassis, provided punch for infantry units lacking armoured support. But then came the urban monsters like the Sturmpanzer IV, or Brummbär, a bunker-busting beast for city fighting, and the terrifying Sturmtiger, which fired massive 380mm rockets capable of levelling entire buildings. Only a few were made, but they were designed for raw destruction, total war, at street level. As the war dragged on and the skies became more dangerous, Germany turned its attention to mobile anti-aircraft vehicles desperate to protect its forces from Allied air superiority. The Flakpanzer IV Wirbelwind, meaning whirlwind, mounted four 20mm cannons in an open-topped rotating turret. Against low-flying planes and soft targets, it unleashed a wall of fire that shredded anything in range. It wasn't just anti-air, it was anti-everything. Its successor, the Ostwind, or Eastwind, simplified the design with a single 37mm gun, giving it better reach and punch against tougher aircraft. But both vehicles shared a critical flaw. Open turrets left crews vulnerable to strafing or artillery, and they were always playing catch-up with the growing Allied air threat. The Flakpanzer 38T was a more desperate measure, slapping a small anti-air gun onto the Czech light tank chassis. Armour was minimal, protection even worse, and the crew was practically exposed. But when you're short on vehicles, you use what you have. Germany's armoured half-tracks were the logistical lifeblood of the panzer divisions. The most famous was the Stanks Kfz 251, or Hanomag, a sloped, tracked troop carrier that allowed infantry to keep up with tanks and dismount under protection. It wasn't flashy, but it was everywhere. Thousands rolled through Europe, ferrying troops, supplies, and sometimes even mounting small guns for support roles. A smaller version, the Stete Kfz 250, served as a reconnaissance vehicle, nimble and compact, used for scouting and command roles. It lacked heavy armour, but made up for it with speed and agility. The Steyr Kfz-7, an 8-ton half-track, played a very different role. It was the prime mover for Germany's feared 88mm flak guns and heavy artillery. With rows of seating for gun crews and space to haul ammo, it was a vital piece of the Wehrmacht's firepower infrastructure. Then there was the FAMO, the monster of recovery vehicles. Built to tow the heaviest tanks out of the mud, it often required 2 or 3 chained together just to pull a broken-down Tiger out of trouble. This was Germany's attempt at battlefield repair, and it wasn't always successful. On the lighter side, the SD Kfz-10 pulled smaller anti-tank guns like the PaK-36, while the SD Kfz-11 handled light howitzers and rocket launchers. Both were basic, open-topped and lacked armor, but filled crucial support roles in getting guns where they were needed. Then there was the oddball, the Kettenkrad. A bizarre hybrid of motorcycle and tracked vehicle, the Kettenkrad was originally designed for paratroopers. It could haul small artillery, tow aircraft, or carry wounded men through terrain that would stop trucks cold. Tiny, weird, and surprisingly useful, it became a symbol of man adaptability. In the muddy fields of the Eastern Front, trucks couldn't move, so engineers converted the reliable Opel Blitz truck by replacing the rear wheels with tank tracks, creating the Opel Multier, or Mule. It wasn't fast, but it moved where nothing else could and kept supplies flowing when roads turned to soup. Armoured reconnaissance vehicles filled yet another gap. The StKfz-22, a sleek 4-wheeled scout car with sloped armour and a 20mm cannon, was fast, mobile, and great for early war recon. But as enemies got tougher, Germany needed more. So came the SDD Kfz-231 with 8 wheels, all-wheel steering and dual driving positions front and back. That meant it could escape in reverse just as fast as it attacked. Tougher, better armed, and capable of navigating rough terrain, it served as a forward scout and command car. Then came the Sund Kfz-234-2, the Puma. Considered by many the best armoured car of WWII, it combined high speed with a powerful 50mm tank gun in a fully enclosed turret. It was so effective, it could hold its own against light enemy armour, an unusual feat for a recon vehicle. Germany even turned these chassis into radio cars, like the SD Kfz-263, equipped with large frame antennas and fixed superstructures. These acted as mobile headquarters coordinating fast-moving tank divisions in real time. Not all vehicles carried guns, many simply carried people. Germany's light utility and staff cars included some of the war's most iconic designs for better or worse. The VW Schwimmwagen was an amphibious version of the Volkswagen Beetle with a bathtub-shaped hull and a propeller that dropped down into the water. It could cross rivers, bogs, and flooded terrain, making it ideal for reconnaissance and light transport. The Porsche 108 and Steyr 1500A were both rugged off-road personnel carriers used to tow light guns, haul equipment, or transport officers. The Steyr was air-cooled and popular in both deserts and snow, giving it longevity across theatres. Then there was the Mercedes-Benz G4, a massive 6-wheeled staff car used mostly for show. It was often seen in propaganda films, carrying Nazi leaders through cheering crowds. Powerful and luxurious, but rarely seen near a battlefield. It was intimidation by presence, not firepower. Germany's motorcycles were also widely used. The BMW R75, with a powered sidecar wheel, was a durable off-road machine used by messengers and recon units. These bikes were more than symbols. They were fast, agile, and vital for quick communication. Logistics mattered just as much as guns, and for that, Germany relied on a range of military trucks and transporters. The Opel Blitz 36 was the backbone of Germany's supply chain. Reliable, easy to fix, and produced in huge numbers, it hauled everything from ammunition to troops. Without it, the front lines would have collapsed. The Krupp-Protzer Kfz-69, known for its flat engine and sloped hood, was used primarily in the early years for towing anti-tank guns and carrying infantry. Meanwhile, the Henschel 33, a heavy 6-wheeled truck, handled bigger loads and engineering gear. These weren't flashy, but they were essential. The Einheitsdiesel, Germany's attempt to standardize truck production, offered excellent off-road ability but was mechanically complex. Like many German vehicles, it worked well until it didn't. Field maintenance was often a nightmare. Finally, we reach the strangest chapter of all, specialized and siege vehicles. The Panzerwerfer 42, mounted on a half-track, carried a 10-barrel Nebelwerfer rocket launcher. Its job, saturation bombardment. But what made it terrifying wasn't the firepower, it was the sound. The high-pitched scream of the rockets earned them the nickname Screaming Memes. When they fired, they weren't just attacking, they were psychologically breaking the enemy. Then there was the Karlgerät, one of the most extreme siege weapons ever built. It fired a 2-ton shell from a self-propelled chassis. Designed to obliterate bunkers and fortresses, it was so massive it required its own crew and support cranes. Fewer than 10 were made, and each was a logistical headache. But when it fired, it erased buildings. Perhaps the weirdest of all was the Goliath. A remote-controlled, tracked bomb the size of a child's wagon, the Goliath was packed with explosives and driven via wire directly into enemy positions. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, the wires were often cut and the machine disabled before reaching its target. But it marked one of the earliest uses of remote warfare, an eerie precursor to modern drones. In total, Germany fielded hundreds of unique vehicle types throughout the war. From brilliantly engineered machines like the Panther and Jagdpanther to impractical monsters like the Jagdtiger and Karlgerät, everyone was born from a mix of desperation, ambition, and battlefield necessity. Some shaped warfare, others faded into obscurity, but all of them were part of a war machine that for a time seemed unstoppable until it wasn't.